Hello and welcome back to the show. Join me today and as we learn about Minnesota, Tim Walz. Here we go. Tim Walz, the governor of Minnesota, projects an image of Minnesota nice, a term that embodies the state's reputation for politeness and community spirit. But beneath the surface lies a string of controversies that have ignited fierce debate and polarized opinions across the state. From his disastrous handling of the George Floyd riots, which drew national attention and destroyed a cities, to his stance on various social issues that only a far-left Democrat would wish for, Walz has become a lightning rod for criticism and praise alike. His weird supporters praise his far-left radical policies, viewing him as a compassionate leader who fights for social justice and equality. However, most Americans see him as a leader who's lost touch with the values of his constituents, accusing him of pushing an agenda that doesn't align with American values. Before diving into the controversies, it's important to understand the political landscape of Minnesota, a state with a rich history of civic engagement and political activism. Minnesota, known for its Midwestern values and strong community ties, has been trending bluer in recent years, reflecting a shift towards more far-left policies. This shift has created a tension between traditional values and radical ideas, with Walz often caught in the middle, trying to push his ideas. His policies have been met with resistance from his constituents, who feel he's pushing a radical agenda that threatens their way of life. As we delve into the specifics of each controversy, it's crucial to examine both sides of the story, understanding the perspectives and motivations behind each viewpoint. Did Walz tell lies in his leadership, or is he simply a victim of partisan attacks and the polarized political climate? I doubt it, but in Tim's world, lies are only a form of misspeaking. Is he a leader who genuinely prioritizes the needs of all Minnesotans, striving to create a more inclusive and equitable state, or is he beholden to special interests that influence his decisions? Sounds like it to me. The answers, as always, are complex and require a nuanced understanding of the issues at hand, as well as a willingness to look beyond the surface and consider the broader context of his actions and policies. The fires of 2020, Walz's handling of the George Floyd riots. The death of George Floyd in Minneapolis ignited a firestorm of anger and unrest. Riots and cities and businesses looted and burned to the ground, not just in Minnesota, but across the nation. The incident became a catalyst for a larger movement against police law and order. As governor, Tim Walz faced the monumental task of quelling the violence while addressing the underlying issues of racial injustice. His leadership was put to the test in an unprecedented way. His response, however, drew both praise from criminals and radicals, and condemnation from law-abiding citizens who just wanted to live life peacefully in their cities without disruption. Critics argued that he allowed the city to burn, accusing him of being too lenient in the face of chaos. Walz waited for cities to burn to the ground before calling in the National Guard, as citizens watched their homes and businesses be destroyed night after night. The citizens of Minneapolis lived in fear day after day as the riots went on, while their governor did nothing to help until it was too late, causing millions of dollars in damage. Left-wing politicians such as Kamala Harris and left-leaning celebrities established bail funds for the criminals responsible. It was tragic. Governor Walz and other radical Democrats highlight his efforts to address systemic racism, including signing defund bills defunding law enforcement, forcing crazy ideas of replacing them with social workers. That sounds weird. However, Walz's detractors paint a different picture, one of hesitation and missed opportunities and crazy ideas. They argue that his initial response was slow and inadequate, allowing the riots to spiral out of control and causing irreparable damage. They point to the widespread looting and arson as evidence of his failure to protect businesses and property, leaving many to fend for themselves. They also criticize his rhetoric, arguing that he was too quick to blame systemic racism and not forceful enough in condemning the violence. This, they say, sent mixed messages to the public and law enforcement. In the aftermath, the community began the long process of healing and rebuilding, with many reflecting on the complex legacy of Walz's leadership during one of the most turbulent times in recent history. Toiletry turmoil. Tim the Tampon Man. In an effort to promote inclusivity and appease transgender students, the Minnesota Department of Education under the Walz administration issued radical guidelines recommending that schools provide menstrual products in young boys' bathrooms. This weird policy sparked a fierce backlash, becoming a flashpoint in the ongoing culture wars. Supporters of the policy, mostly out-of-touch Democrats, argue that it's a common-sense measure to ensure that all students have access to essential hygiene products. They point out that misguided transgender young girls who identify as male but may menstruate in the boys' bathroom should not be excluded or stigmatized. They also argue that this crazy policy is about inclusivity, not forcing an agenda on anyone. Critics, however, view the policy as an example of government overreach and a misguided attempt to impose a radical gender ideology on children. They argue that it's unnecessary and disruptive, creating awkward situations for students. They also question the cost and logistics of implementing such a weird policy statewide. During the height of the COVID-19 pandemic, Governor Walz implemented a number of draconian measures aimed at curbing the spread of the virus. One such measure was the establishment of a hotline, allowing residents to report businesses and individuals for violating COVID-19 restrictions. This is something that you would experience in a country such as China or North Korea, not America. This snitch hotline, as it became known, drew immediate criticism for fostering a climate of fear and distrust. Supporters of the hotline argued that it was a necessary tool to enforce public health measures and protect vulnerable populations. Maybe these people watch too much American fear-mongering news. They pointed to the seriousness of the pandemic and the importance of collective action in combating the virus. They also argued that the hotline empowered citizens to hold each other accountable for following guidelines and out-of-touch mandates, letting the government tell them what is right and what is wrong. Critics, however, condemned the hotline as Orwellian and a violation of privacy. They argued that it encouraged neighbors to spy on each other and created a culture of fear and suspicion, another common practice of the Chinese. They also questioned the effectiveness of the hotline, arguing that it was more likely to be used for personal vendettas than legitimate public health concerns. In 2006, during his first run for Congress, Tim Walz's past came back to haunt him when details of a 1995 DWI arrest surfaced. Walz, who had been open about the arrest previously, faced renewed scrutiny as opponents questioned his judgment and fitness for office. The incident, though decades old, raised questions about his character and whether he had fully addressed the issue. After his campaign got caught lying, or what Tim calls another misspoken event, Walz addressed the arrest head-on, expressing remorse for his actions and emphasizing that he had learned from his mistakes of driving drunk 96 miles per hour recklessly down the highway. He also highlighted his commitment to addressing drunk driving, both as a citizen and as a legislator. His radical supporters argued that the incident was a youthful indiscretion and should not overshadow his record of public service. I wonder what they would say if this were Donald Trump who was in this position. However, critics argued that the incident revealed a pattern of recklessness and poor judgment. They questioned whether Walz had been entirely truthful about the circumstances surrounding the arrest. We already know that he wasn't during his campaign, but Tim once again has misspoken, pointing to inconsistencies in his account. The DWI arrest, though not disqualifying, but yet quite concerning. Tim Walz, who served in the Army National Guard for 24 years, has often cited his military service as evidence of his leadership and commitment to public service. However, his claims about his service record have come under intense scrutiny, with some accusing him of exaggerating his role and accomplishments. Walz's radical supporters and left-leaning news media point to his lengthy service record and the numerous awards he received as proof of his dedication and sacrifice. They argue that his military experience gives him a unique perspective, and even though he has lied, it will still makes him well-suited for leadership. They also defend his right to speak about his service, arguing that it's an important part of his personal narrative, even if misspoken, aka lied about his deployments and carrying weapons into war when he has never. However, critics have raised questions about specific claims Walz has made regarding his service. They argue that he has inflated his role in certain missions, and exaggerated and flat out lied about the significance of his contributions. They also point out that Governor Tim used his military service as a political shield, deflecting criticism by wrapping himself in the flag. Tim Walz's tenure as governor has been marked by a series of controversies that have tested his leadership and divided the state of Minnesota. From his disastrous handling of the George Floyd riots to his stance on radicalized social issues, Walz has become a polarizing figure, loved by the far left and loathed by everyone else. The George Floyd protests in 2020 were a shameful moment in his governorship. His decisions during this period were scrutinized heavily, with some criminals and rioters praising his actions and others criticizing his approach as too lenient. His stance on social issues, including police defunding and what he calls racial justice, has further polarized opinions. Supporters such as former President Barack Obama and crazy Elizabeth Warren and other left-wing Democrats see him as a champion of left-wing values, while detractors view him as out of touch with the needs and values of everyday Minnesotans. The question now is whether he can overcome these controversies and secure his political future. Walz's supporters argue that he's a compassionate and effective leader who has been dealt a difficult hand. They point to his radical far-left policies and his commitment to what they call social justice as evidence of his dedication to making Minnesota a better place for all. They believe that he can weather the storms of controversy and emerge stronger on the other side. His efforts in areas such as socialized healthcare, tampons for all, and socialism economic development are often highlighted as key achievements that demonstrate his capability as a supreme leader. However, Walz's detractors believe that he has lost his way, becoming beholden to special interests of feelings over law and out of touch with the values of everyday Minnesotans. They point to his handling of the horrible riots, the COVID-19 pandemic, and his stance on social issues as evidence of his failed leadership. They argue that his policies have not effectively addressed the needs of the state, and that his decisions have often been more about political expediency than genuine leadership. Citizens also highlight his hideous response to the COVID-19 pandemic, arguing that his measures were overbearing and draconian. This has added another layer of complexity to his already contentious tenure. Americans believe that he is vulnerable and that his political career hangs in the balance. Only time will tell what the future holds for Tim Walz. Will he be remembered as a governor who led Minnesota through challenging times, or will his legacy be tarnished by the mishandling of just about everything and telling all of his lies? One thing is certain, Walz's story is far from over, and the next chapter promises to be just as much of a disaster as the last. As the state of Minnesota continues to navigate these turbulent times and still rebuilding even as of today, the decisions and actions of its governor will undoubtedly play a crucial role in shaping its future to never let that happen again. The coming months and years will be critical in determining whether Walz can rebuild trust with those who have lost faith in his leadership, and whether he can continue to push forward his radical left vision for Minnesota. As he faces the challenges ahead, the eyes of Minnesota and the nation will be watching closely, waiting to see if Tim Walz can fix what he has broken. The stakes are high and the outcome is uncertain, but one thing is clear: the future of Tim Walz and the state of Minnesota have lost its charm. As the narrative unfolds, it will be a testament to the resilience and determination of both the weird governor and the people he serves. The journey ahead will be challenging, but it will also be an opportunity for the people to hold him accountable. The story of Tim Walz is far from over, and the next chapter promises to be just as alarming as the last. Stay tuned as we continue to follow the unfolding saga of Walz's political journey and the harmful impact it will have on the future of Minnesota and possibly the world. Thanks again for watching, and if you enjoyed this video, please like and subscribe. And as always, we look forward to entertaining you in the next one.